Recently, Candace Owens went on Jubilee Surrounded to decry the evils of feminism, and it went pretty much exactly like you'd expect.
My first claim is that the sexual revolution has devalued women and made them infinitely less happy.
So we need to break this down. First, what was the sexual revolution? The sexual revolution was a movement in the 60s and 70s that aimed to challenge our preconceived notions on sex, gender roles, and reproductive rights. And it's the reason we have a lot of stuff like birth control and a fairly ingrained cultural view that women are not property of their husbands and should have full agency over their sexual destinies. On to the critique that this somehow devalued women and made them less happy. Well, again, we have to pause here because we need to define our terms, because value and happiness aren't easily quantifiable. But let's start with value. By almost every measurable metric, this claim does not hold up. Women have more economic power today than they've ever had before. They earn more degrees than men, and they hold more positions of leadership than they've had in the past. They have greater sexual agency, and consent is now something that everyone takes very, very seriously. They have more legal protections, and for example, women can no longer be legally raped by their husbands, which was not the case prior to the sexual revolution. I think a good example of the progress we've made pre versus post sexual revolution, fictional as it may be, is by looking at a character like Lucy from I Love Lucy.
I am not arguing about women's right. I am the first one to agree that women should have all the rights they want, as long as they stay in their place.
Oh, you're just as bad as he is, Fred. You men tell us that we have equal rights, but you certainly don't give us a chance to act like it.
What do you want? You've got the vote? You wear pants? You drive buses? You wrestle? You go every place you please except the steam room in the YMCA.
And then comparing her to a post-revolutionary character like Claire Huxtable.
Doesn't serve your man?
Well, yeah.
Let me tell you something, Elvis. You see, I am not serving Dr. Huxtable, okay?
Okay.
That's the kind of thing that goes on in a restaurant. Now, I'm going to bring him a cup of coffee just like he brought me a cup of coffee this morning. And that, young man, is what marriage is made of. It is give and take 50-50. And if you don't get it together and drop these macho attitudes, you are never going to have anybody bringing you anything, anywhere, any place, anytime, ever.
Lucy was a housewife who was entirely managed by her husband, whereas Claire Huxtable was she was a mom, but she also was a lawyer, mother of 5, and was just, a kick-ass woman all around. If you ask me which world I'd rather raise my daughter in, and which character I'd rather have them affected by, I'd choose Claire Huxtable every time, and a post-sexual revolution society every time, and it's really not even close. And honestly, I think Candace Owens would agree with that too, even if she doesn't want to admit it. I don't actually think she hates feminism. I think she hates Kardashian feminism, which is something she actually brings up a lot during this debate. But we'll come back to that later. Now, regarding the claim that women today are less happy, I think that's even trickier than value to define. Happiness really is just tricky to measure by nature. You can't just look at someone and say, their serotonin is down 14% this quarter. There are a few metrics that researchers do try to use. One of those is self-reported happiness in surveys like the General Social Survey, mental health data like rates of depression or anxiety, relationship satisfaction, divorce rates. Ultimately, the data is complicated. Some studies show a relative decline in women's reported happiness since the 1970s. Others suggest women are just now more honest about their dissatisfaction than they were in the past. Some point to modern stressors like work-life balance or social media comparison rather than feminism itself as being the main cause for the dissatisfaction. Candace makes the argument that women entering the workforce has made them more unhappy, and that's evidenced by the fact that they're more likely to use antidepressants than men. But personally, I think that's, just hyper reductive. I think the takeaway from the data is more like freedom comes with choices and choices come with pressure. But there's a big difference from saying that versus women were better off when they had less rights and less control. That's an insane thing to say. That's like me saying, slaves didn't have anxiety about finding jobs or finding housing, so maybe they were better off being enslaved, right? That's a crazy thing to say. So overall, I'm gonna give this claim a 3 out of 10. Okay, on to the next one.
My second claim is that no career will give women as much joy and fulfillment as raising children.
Okay, so I don't necessarily disagree with this claim, but I think the same is true for men too. Parenthood is one of the deepest sources of meaning most people will likely ever experience, if not the deepest. But But again, terms like joy and fulfillment are nearly impossible to measure, and they're deeply subjective. They vary wildly person to person. So where I do agree with Candace on this is that raising a child while working is a different experience for men than it is for women. And this is largely due to biology, but also due to societal and social expectations as well. And I actually do think this goes both ways. So with women, women who try to pursue a career while also raising children, they have been accused and often get accused of being selfish and trying to have it all. On the flip side, when a man says he wants to be a stay-at-home dad, we treat him like he's a lazy piece of shit. He's seen as someone who's failing to do his duty of providing for his family. So what does this tell you? That society still clings to this old framework where men are providers and women are nourishers. The sexual revolution, and feminism more broadly, challenges that idea. It argues that people should do what they're best at, regardless of gender. And on that point, I agree like 1,000%. Where I do disagree though, and I think this is where Candace is coming from, is on the idea that men and women are equally equipped, biologically and structurally, to live outside those roles. I don't think we're there yet. Right, so during the debate, Candace keeps coming back to this idea that women can't have it all. And what I think she means by that is, a woman being a full-time nourisher and a full-time provider, like a Claire Huxtable, might be aspirational, but it's extremely difficult because between pregnancy, childbirth, nursing, postpartum recovery, a woman's body and time are taxed in a way that society doesn't really fully account for. Maternity care is still pretty weak, support systems are inconsistent, and careers really aren't designed to be bent around motherhood, at least not yet. So what I believe Candace is really saying here is, if you're forced to choose, and many women are, then choosing kids may be this safer bet for long-term fulfillment. And honestly, I do understand that argument. I get it. But at the same time, I think it's also unfortunate that women even have to choose in the first place. On that regard, I think progress is possible. I think we can reshape systems to support women who want both, and we can normalize caregiving in men, and we can push workplaces to evolve. So for this case specifically, I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10. I don't disagree on a fundamental level, but I do think there's a world where women don't necessarily have to choose. Okay, on to Candace's last claim.
My next claim is that we live under a matriarchy, not a patriarchy.
Okay, so Candace absolutely has to be working with their own unique definitions here. So before we respond to this, let's actually define these terms. A patriarchy is a system in which men hold the majority of power, politically, economically, and socially. A matriarchy, by contrast, would mean that women hold the dominant power across these same domains. And by any academic standard, any definition, we do not live under a matriarchy. I don't know what Candace is smoking. Globally, men in the US, I don't know if she narrowed it down to just the US, but either way, men still dominate leadership roles in the government, business, and religion. They hold the majority of wealth, control the most corporate boardrooms, and shape most policy decisions. So structurally, we're very much still in a patriarchy. Now, what I think Candace is really trying to say, and really what she's claiming here, is that women hold more power in the social context, and I do think that may be true. Women in general have a much easier time, profiting on social media. They're often more influential in culture, used in marketing, fashion, and media to sell products and define trends. Essentially, I think she's saying women get more attention online, more emotional influence in families, and more sympathy in certain public narratives. And, that's true. I don't necessarily disagree with any of that. But the thing is, attention is not the same thing as power, right? Being visible does not always translate to being in control. Candace also goes on to introduce the idea of a natural patriarchy, which I do actually feel is kind of contradictory to her central point. But she's saying that men and women are just naturally drawn to different roles, and those choices shape society. And I know this for a fact. It's a point she got from Jordan Peterson because he brings it up a lot.
Like, men are more interested in things, generally speaking, and women are more interested in people, generally speaking. And so how does that play out in the world? About 85% of nurses in Scandinavia are female, and about 85 to 90% of engineers are male. But it does have to do with interest, and the differences in interest are big.
But yeah, there definitely is some truth to it. Studies have shown gender preferences in career choices, interests, and even social behavior. But ultimately, I do think that brings us to a bigger question of if both, male labor and female labor are essential to building a strong society, then how do we build a world where both are valued equally, culturally and economically? Because right now, nurturing labor, so that's stuff like caregiving, teaching, emotional intelligence, skills more, naturally associated with women, are consistently undervalued and underpaid. Meanwhile, traditionally male labor like engineering, finance, and military leadership gets more status, money, and institutional support. Like, just as an example of this, instead of funneling billions into Elon Musk's, firework company, if we spent that same amount of money helping elementary schools raise children and teach them how to read correctly, I think society would be much, much better off. Anyways, I think that's just about the gist of it. She did have one more claim that I think was so insane that I actually decided to make it into a separate video. So if you want to watch that, you can watch that here. But thanks for tuning in. My name is Vermillion, and remember, we live in the stories we tell ourselves. Till next time.